Hello and welcome to Talking Development. At the World Bank Group, we believe that creating jobs is the most effective way to reduce poverty and expand opportunity. But jobs don't appear on their own. They depend on the rules, norms, and institutions that give firms the confidence to invest, hire, and grow. Few people have explored this connection more deeply than Professor James Robinson, who you probably know as the co-author of Why Nations Fail. And if you missed the news, last year James, together with Darren Acemoglu and Simon Johnson, was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences for their work on how institutions shape prosperity across countries. James, welcome. It's such a great honor for me to meet you and a pleasure to sit down and talk to you for a little bit. Congratulations again on the Nobel Prize, a very special prize. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure, thank you.
I know that you are very interested in the issue of inequality and inequality between countries and the role institutions play in addressing that. Can you just share briefly where did this interest start and how did you choose to pursue an academic career and advise countries around it?
I lived overseas when I was a child. My father was a sort of itinerant engineer who spent his whole life working overseas in Africa for decades, West Africa mostly, East Africa. He ended up working in Saudi Arabia. I guess I was fascinated in a sort of incoherent way, in all of this variation in the world, like so many differences, and like why. And I think I converged on this institutional explanation really by reading history more than anything else, reading about the history of this process. How did the world end up looking like this? And so you get into the history of it, and then you look at these kind of structures like slavery or, the way labor markets function, or you see like these rules create poverty, they create inequality, and that's institutions is the language. So I think I just kept on piling up these examples, the history of the Americas, the comparison between North America and Latin America.
Fascinating, and like you say, you start wondering why one country develops one way and another, even though their starting circumstances may not be so different. So interesting. Thank you for sharing that. We here at the bank have really been thinking hard about what could make a real dent on poverty. And we have arrived at the fact that we think job creation is incredibly important because it creates income, of course, but it also gives people a pathway out of poverty in a more self-sufficient manner, and it provides for dignity. Does this resonate with you, and does it align with the work that you've been undertaking, and how so?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I think having a job, I think as humans we're all looking for meaning in our life, and I think in employment and a job is so connected to having meaning and purpose, in the modern world. And if you ask, any African, what do they want? They want more jobs, and so this is actually, if you actually talk to the people in developing countries, that's what they tell you, So I think that's fantastic that's what you're responding to. People's own understanding of the problem is lack of employment. Think about female empowerment also. There's overwhelming evidence that female labor force participation, getting women out of the house, getting them a job, empowers them in so many ways, which we know has huge spillovers for development in terms of education of children and many other dimensions. It makes total sense to me.
I'm going to stay on this for just a moment because there are many dimensions of the job creation agenda that we're thinking about. One issue is a job. Another issue is a quality job. People sort of travel through their journey, they get more demanding and they want greater quality out of the job that they're doing. How do you think about that? A basic job versus sort of the quality of that job?
That's going to depend on technology adoption, it's going to depend on education, it's going to depend on, structural transformation. So it's one thing to say, let's create jobs in Nigeria, but like, as you say, what sort of jobs? That's pretty important, and challenging jobs or skilled jobs, like technological change, investment in education. I think that's the way to create what you're calling higher quality jobs.
Yeah. It's fascinating, and the whole area of technology is its own huge chapter, of course, as we're seeing in so many countries now. I want to come back to institutions because we have also seen that where the quality and capacity in countries is underpinned by independent, strong institutional foundations, development is more resilient, development is stronger, investments can more easily be attracted, more jobs can be created. But we're also quite worried that in many parts of the world we're seeing an erosion in institutions. And we believe that we need to spend a significant amount of our development support on really preserving institutional foundations and strength. How are you seeing this today, and what do you think are some of the biggest challenges to institutional perseverance, and what are some of the surest or most meaningful pathways to ensure them?
Yeah, I think, I mean, institutions can be challenged for lots of reasons. You know, politics, you know, institutions may reduce the scope, you know, of political actors, and they may rule out some types of political strategies which people may find appealing. So there's always political incentives that can undermine institutions. Also, there's ideological motivations for challenging institutions. I think, you know, what can we do about that? Well, I think like what I can do about it is to sort of remind people about the overwhelming amount of evidence of the importance of institutions for a flourishing society in some sense. You know, to just get that information out there, and also to figure out, you know, how to build coalitions of people who understand that, how to bring people together, you know, around this institutional axis as a way of uniting people and giving people a kind of common interpretation of what will help their society to flourish.
Interesting. So creating a bit of a community or a mobilization of common interests around the value of institutions. Now, you've written books. We're coming back from a summer break. A lot of us were asked, you know, did you have a reading list this summer? And do you have time to read? And if you have time to read, what do you like to read? Can I ask you, when you're not writing a book, what are you reading?
Oh, I read everything. I read anything and everything. I just finished the autobiography of the founder of Hyundai, for example.
Oh.
Absolutely fascinating book, you know, about the transformation in Korea.
Yeah.
I just finished a book called Afroeconomics by a British historian, like trying to think about economic concepts historically in Africa and how they differed from Western concepts.
Wonderful.
I read a textbook on cultural anthropology called We the Alien, just for fun, by Paul Bohannon.
Love it.
So I read history, I read anthropology, I read biographies. I read lots of biographies nowadays, actually.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yes.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. Fascinating to hear about your work, what got it started, how you see it resonate with our jobs agenda, but most importantly, the importance of institutions for good development. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Here is my take. What really matters for development is whether countries create opportunities for people to work, contribute with dignity, and build a future for themselves and their families. This does not happen in isolation. It depends on the rules and institutions that shape how economies function. James' work shows this clearly. Where institutions are inclusive, countries grow and opportunities expand for all. Where they are weak, opportunity narrows, inequality deepens, and job creation suffers. For us, this reinforces the fact that development requires strong foundations. This is exactly where the World Bank Group comes in, supporting governments to strengthen policies and institutions, helping businesses invest and expand, and providing guarantees that reduce risk and attract capital. But reforms don't stick because they look good on paper. They last when different groups, governments, businesses, and communities see benefit in supporting them and working together to make them happen. That's how we help create the conditions for more jobs, more opportunity, and lasting prosperity. That's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Talking Development.